Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for another virtual legal clinic Know Your Rights session. Today's topic is on public benefits and taxpayer rights for college students. I'm Emily Alvarez, Say Yes Buffalo coordinator and paralegal at the Volunteer Lawyers Project. Thank you to our partners at Say Yes Buffalo for sponsoring today's presentation. Before we get started, I want to remind all of our guests and participants that free legal advice is available through the Volunteer Lawyers Project. We can address any non-criminal legal issues such as family law, housing, divorce, unemployment, and other types of cases. Sarah, if you can go to the next slide. Our hotline numbers. You can call if you have specific legal questions like housing or family. We'll show this flyer at the end of the presentation as well, so you can have a chance to write down these phone numbers. Next slide, please. I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers for today, Ms. Diana Prosky and Ms. Zara Sala. Zara is our qualified tax expert as part of VLP's Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. She joined VLP in November of 2019, where her practice is focused on representing taxpayers with federal tax disputes, as well as conducting outreach and education events throughout the community. Zara is a graduate of the University of Nebraska College of Law and completed her undergraduate degree from York University in Toronto, Canada. Diana Prosky is a staff attorney at Neighborhood Legal Services and has been working at NLS since 2008. She primarily handles public benefit matters, especially for those experiencing homelessness. Before joining NLS, Ms. Prosky spent 4 years handling workers' compensation cases. Ms. Prosky earned her bachelor's and master's in library and information science from Kent State University. She then attended the University of Buffalo Law School, graduating in 2003. Thank you both so much for today's presentation. I just wanted to quickly also remind our participants and viewers to please feel free to ask questions. You can do so by using the chat feature if you're joining us via Zoom, or you can leave a comment if you're watching us via Facebook. Again, thank you so much. And Ms. Prosky, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm going to talk about public benefits, particularly with an emphasis on benefits for college students. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Disclaimer. So briefly, I work at Neighborhood Legal Services, and we investigate negative actions, determine whether they were lawful, and then provide clients with information and advice about that action. So for example, if you apply for a benefit and get denied, or we're getting a benefit and it is reduced or discontinued, you should get a written notice explaining why. We could look at the notice and then we could tell you whether we think that the action was correct. We only handle civil actions, and we work in the areas of disability, housing, family law, and public benefits. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to start by just reviewing some basic rights that everybody has when they're looking for public benefits. Everyone has the right to apply and have their application processed. Everyone has the right to ask for help getting documents or other verification to which they do not have access. Everyone has the right to a written decision on their application, regardless of which benefit they're applying for, and that decision must include the reason for the denial and the regulation on which the decision is based. Everyone has the right to review their file. Everyone has the right to request a conference and a fair hearing if they disagree with a decision. At the hearing, everyone has the right to request and receive documents the agency will present before the hearing. You also have the right to present your own documents and testimony. And everyone has the right to reasonable accommodations based on disabilities in every step of the process. Okay, next slide, please. The agency, the Department of Social Services, also has some rights. They have the right to interview you and to investigate whether you are eligible. The interview may be in person, typically for cash assistance, though right now they're doing most of them over the phone. Most interviews are waived. In-person interviews are waived until the end of this month. We don't know whether that's going to be extended. The agency has the right to ask you to verify information. So they can ask you for various documents to verify whether you're eligible. And they have the right to time to process your case. And the amount of time depends on the benefit you're applying for. Okay, next. So I just like to give out some basic terms so that people know a little bit what I'm talking about, and it sounds a little less like I'm talking in code. So the applicant is just the person applying for benefits. A recipient is someone whose application has already been approved. So your application's approved and you're actually receiving the benefit. Temporary assistance is the cash grant to meet your shelter, utility, and basic need costs. It's traditionally kind of been known as welfare or cash assistance. Emergency is a need that must be met to ensure the person's or family's health or safety, for example, shelter, food, heat during the winter. And we'll talk more about emergency benefits. A reasonable accommodation is basically a change in the usual rules or procedures, and that's to ensure people with disabilities can access benefits and services. And then a notice. Notices are really, really important because they are the written information about your case that the agency or the Department of Social Services has to give you when they make a decision about your application or about an existing case. It must provide specific information, and if it's about an existing case, they have to give it to you at least 10 days or issue it at least 10 days before the change is made. And those written notices are usually the things that we're going to ask about so that we can figure out whether the decision was correct. Okay. So let's start with emergency assistance benefits. The rules are different for all of the programs, but basically an emergency is an immediate need. So that's like a higher level of emergency if the person or family's health or safety would be at risk if the need is not met that day. So the easiest example is shelter. If somebody needs a place to stay that night, they apply for shelter. The Department of Social Services needs to make a determination that same day. Other emergency benefits, they have up to 30 days, depending on the circumstances. So benefits that you can get to help with emergencies include emergency shelter. You can get assistance with rent arrears, utility arrears, which is actually not HEAP. It's a separate program. Security to obtain new housing, help moving, fees for storage, help repairing, replacing, or purchasing appliances, getting furniture to establish a household, or to replace clothing or belongings lost in a fire. But as I said, each benefit has different rules. So when you apply, you're going to have a different set of standards for each one. In general, for a single person, the income limit is 125% of federal poverty, except for shelter, and families it's 200%. So it's higher than a lot of people think. And students may be eligible for emergency benefits. So that's an important thing to remember. We actually have an unfortunately high number of students, particularly community college students, who end up being eligible for benefits, including shelter. Okay, next slide, thanks. So now I'm going to talk about ongoing cash assistance. So this is the grant that's going to be the ongoing cash benefit or the ongoing payments DSS makes on your behalf to meet your costs of rent, utilities, and basic needs. In Erie County, it's the Erie County Department of Social Services that accepts and processes the applications. All adult applicants, let me just briefly say, you can apply online at mybenefits.my.gov. You can contact the Department of Social Services to request an application, or you can print an application off of the state's Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance website and submit it to DSS, or you can just pick one up at the Department of Social Services. So you're going to have a series of interviews. The interview the first interview really is going to be about whether you are employable. So all applicants under 60 have to participate in that assessment. So they're going to come to one of three conclusions. If you may be unable to work because of a medical or psychiatric or other condition. You may be unable to work because of a substance abuse disorder, in which case you'll be required to attend a substance abuse treatment program. Or if you are able to work, you'll be required to participate in the job search and work program. If you have a medical condition, oh, that's doubled. That's okay. Go ahead, sorry. So if you have a medical condition and you cannot work, the Department of Social Services is going to ask you to have a form filled out by your doctor or your other healthcare provider to verify that. As I said, if you have a substance abuse disorder, they're going to refer you to a treatment program. Otherwise, you're going to be assigned to the work activity. So for students, what students can do is they can actually, during the employment assessment, ask the employment counselor to make school part of their employment plan and use their school hours to fulfill their work requirement. This is important because this is basically the reason most people for years and years could not get public assistance while they were in school. Because if you wanted to go to school, you had to do both the work requirement and then your school activities. Then in 2014, they changed the law to make student college or community college activities actually fulfill the work program so that you can use those hours and go to school. Parenting students under those circumstances can also get daycare. So if you do have a child and you're attending school and it counts as your work activity, then you're going to have daycare for that time as well, which was another barrier for many years to people being able to access education. Students also have the right to request a fair hearing if their employment counselor refuses to allow them to attend school as part of their employment plan. But it is important to say very clearly, I'm in school and I want it to be part of my employment plan and I want it to be my work activity if you're applying for cash assistance. Okay. So your case is open, let's say. You're going to either get a notice saying, yes, your application was approved, or no, your application was denied. So once your case is open, there are going to be three basic parts to your grant. You're going to have shelter, which is your rent, utilities, if the utilities are your responsibility, and basic needs, which is pretty much everything else. You can get benefits even if you don't have a rent expense. So for example, if you have a student who's couch surfing, they can get public assistance if they're otherwise qualified, and they'll just get a basic needs grant without the shelter allowance because they don't have the shelter expense, but they can still get the benefits, which is the important part. Work activities and substance abuse treatment must be complied with or a sanction may be imposed. So if you are in school and you stop going to class, you may be sanctioned, but as long as you continue doing what you're supposed to do, you should be okay. If you have a regular work activity and you don't go, you could be sanctioned. Or if you have substance abuse treatment requirements and you don't attend your program, you could be sanctioned. And a sanction is when they take away your benefits for a specific period of time and until you comply with the requirement. And then usually every 6 months or so, they require that you recertify so that they can review everything, make sure that you're still eligible, and make sure that your budget is still correct. And you must attend the appointments. So if, for example, you're living someplace where you have trouble getting your mail, if you miss that recertification mail, then your case is likely going to close. So it's important to make sure that you have an address where you can get mail. You can use your residence and a second address. So if you have a friend, a relative, a PO box, you can ask them to send the notices both places so that you can get your mail. Okay, so how much is the grant? The grant is really, really low. This is a cash assistance standard of need chart. So with children, as you can see, a household of two, so a single parent and a child, the maximum total grant generally is $559 per month. The shelter allowance is $291 per month. So the state is saying you should pay $291 per month for rent for one adult and one child. These standards have not been updated in a very long time, and that's reflected clearly in the amounts. So if you start working, you may become ineligible pretty quickly. And then keep in mind that the heat allowance is only provided if you are responsible for that bill. So if rent is included, if utilities are included in your rent, or if you have a roommate and the bill is in your roommate's name, you will not get that allowance for heat that is listed there. Okay. So this temporary assistance and other kinds of income, we see this a lot because often we have a household where different household members have different kinds of income. So maybe part of the household has temporary assistance and one person has SSI for a disability. How it's counted depends on the type of income. So if it's earned income, so it's income from work, for families with children, you're going to get a significant disregard on your income. So it's really important to report your income to your worker within 10 days of receiving your first paycheck so that you get that discount, because it's going to allow you to remain on temporary assistance much longer because they're going to discount more than half of your income. For households without children, So if you're just a single person, they're just going to count the total amount, the gross income against your grant after they remove once a month $90 disregard. And then student income generally counts against the household's grant unless the student is still in high school. Social Security, it depends on the type of Social Security. So SSI is invisible. So if a household member has SSI, they're just going to ignore that person and pretend they're not part of the cash assistance case. SSD, survivors benefits and retirement, are going to count against the entire household. Child support counts generally against the grant, but you can get what they call the pass-through, which is up to $200 per month of current child support that you get to keep on top of your grant. So it's a good program for people who are getting child support, but it's still not going to be enough. Then they can get temporary assistance. So yes, temporary assistance keeps part of your child support, but you get to keep part of it, and it doesn't even count against your grant. And then unemployment benefits, generally speaking, were really easy to figure out in the past year and a half. Because of COVID, they've gotten extremely complicated. So it depends which type of unemployment benefits during the pandemic you were getting as to whether they count. And there's actually a whole little video that we made that's about that, because different types of pandemic unemployment counted. So depending on which of the laws authorized those benefits, some of it counted, some of it didn't. Generally speaking, unemployment is going to count against the entire household. All right. So household composition, particularly when you're talking about students who are getting ready to go to college, you want to remember that household composition is going to make a difference, because where the student lives and whether they're over or under 21 is going to impact how benefits are calculated. So for a family who is currently receiving public assistance, if your child leaves high school and starts college, if they have a job, their income is going to be counted. They're most likely going to remain part of your public assistance case. But as I said, you can actually make school their work activity so that you don't have to worry so much about getting a sanction. Under some circumstances, the child can have their own case, but then sometimes the parent can be sued for child support if the child has their own case. So if you can keep your child on your case and they can continue getting benefits because school is going to be their work activity, then that's going to create far fewer problems. And then independent students are going to qualify on their own. And independent students with a rent expense would get a regular grant that includes a shelter allowance. As I said, if they're couch surfing or just staying with someone, or you're letting them live there without paying rent, because you're not a legally responsible relative, then they would get the basic needs grant. Okay. So that's cash assistance. So now that we have that set of rules, we're going to talk about a whole different set. SNAP, or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which used to be known as food stamps. These are benefits provided to low-income households specifically to purchase food. The budgeting for SNAP works very differently. SNAP budgets primarily use rent and utility costs and balance that against your income to determine the amount of benefit you get. So if you are in a household with a low rent cost, or if your utilities are included in your rent, you might have a much lower SNAP benefit than a household that has the same income and the same number of people, because the rent and utilities are so closely tied to how SNAP benefits are calculated. But SNAP is a wonderful benefit, and I really, really encourage people who might be eligible to apply. And I'm really, really excited about some of the student changes, because SNAP brings money into the local economy because it's all federal dollars. So when you spend it, you're generating economic activity in your local community. So applications, you can pick one up at the Rath Building, print one out, you can mail it, you can fax it, or you can apply online again at the mybenefits.my.gov website. You can also use that website to submit your documentation, and all SNAP interviews are by phone. So if you don't have a phone, you need to put that on your application. Otherwise, they're just going to do everything they can by phone. Expedited SNAP is available. Those are benefits issued within the 7 days after you apply. That's usually you'll get a call the next day after you apply, sometimes the same day, to be screened. And they're gonna, if you have $100 or less in liquid resources and less than $150 in gross monthly income, or if your monthly income and available resources are less than your rent and utility costs or your mortgage and utility costs, you would qualify for expedited SNAP. And just try to remember, with expedited SNAP, that doesn't mean you qualify for ongoing benefits. You still have to finish the application process. Okay. We can go, yeah, there we go. So I mentioned that there are lots of changes to SNAP student rules. Traditionally, full-time students have not been eligible for SNAP benefits unless they fit into one of the listed exceptions. The list of exceptions is getting bigger. So that's great because, I know when I was in school, we were borrowing money through student loans and using it to buy groceries. And if we had been able to qualify for SNAP, that would have made a big difference. So the most common exceptions are students who work an average of 20 hours per week while they're in school, students who receive federal work study as part of their financial aid, or students who are parenting or caring for a child under 6. However, if you have temporary assistance, you'll be eligible for SNAP through your cash assistance case. All right, so some of the exciting changes. So changes to student eligibility rules. There have also been significant increases in amounts to some households. They have changed how unemployment benefits in some circumstances are budgeted against SNAP. Primarily the pandemic unemployment benefits. Many of those benefits did not count against SNAP. Some did, some didn't. And then they also, since the pandemic started, have been issuing what's called supplemental EA SNAP to existing SNAP households. And that's basically sort of the extra benefits that people have been getting to bring them at least up to the maximum amount for their household, because most households do not get the maximum amount of SNAP benefits. So during the pandemic, everybody was getting at least that amount. And that actually ends this month. So here we can see how much the SNAP is being increased starting October 1st. So it's quite a bit. It's the biggest increase we've seen in quite a while. I want to say, I remember a time when a single person got like $190 a month, and now you can get $250. You can see that, and then you can see, if you look all the way on the right, just how much it's going up for each household size. So if you have a household of 4, the maximum you could get before now is $782, but starting next month, it's $835. So that's important to keep in mind, because we want to continue receiving those SNAP benefits, and we hope to continue seeing increases, so because groceries are getting more expensive. Okay, so a couple brief rules about parenting students. So in addition to the SNAP rules, if you are a parenting student, there are 2 types of daycare to keep in mind. There's guaranteed daycare. That's when they must provide you with daycare from the Department of Social Services, because you have a work activity as part of your cash assistance. So they have to provide you daycare so you can fulfill your work obligation. And that's really important when it comes to making school your work activity, because that means you get guaranteed daycare for school, which is, generally speaking, not available. Subsidized daycare is the program that people apply separately, and then you may or may not have, they calculate a parent share, and then they pay the provider the balance. Subsidized daycare is only available for students in very specific programs, and the daycare unit can give you more information about those programs. Usually it's things like, things that are going to lead directly to a job and that last less than a couple of years. And then having a child is an exception to the student SNAP eligibility rule. So if you have a child, you will be eligible for SNAP, depending on the rest of the eligibility factors, but that is an exception to the students can't get SNAP rule. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So just a couple other things about SNAP before I talk about pandemic EBT that I forgot to mention. So some of the student rule changes. There are specific programs at schools that allow people to receive SNAP. And you want to ask your school if you're in one of those programs, because the Department of Social Services doesn't make the decision about whether you are in a qualifying program. Your school does. So that could be another way to get access to SNAP while you're a student. They also have expanded eligibility during the pandemic for students to include students who are receiving unemployment benefits. So if you couldn't work during the pandemic, but you were receiving unemployment, you were also eligible for SNAP. And I know there is pending legislation to make these changes permanent. I don't know what the status of it is, whether it's been passed, but it's good because there is some momentum toward increasing the availability of these benefits to students on a permanent level as opposed to just the temporary level during the pandemic. Okay, I think we can go back to pandemic EBT. All right, so because a lot of us are parents, myself included, there's been a lot of confusion about the pandemic EBT program. This was essentially a benefit provided for students who would normally receive free and reduced price meals at school, but didn't because they weren't in school during the pandemic. So it's really delayed the pandemic EBT benefits for the fall of 2020 and spring 2021, so last school year, are still, I think, just rolling out. So most people by now should have gotten them who qualify. But obviously we did not get them during the school year when the kids were at home. And this was not tied to eligibility for SNAP. They use the SNAP system to issue the benefits, but it doesn't really it's not actually a SNAP benefit. It's a reduced free school lunch program. So, and it was based on receipt, not eligibility. So if you have a child, for example, in the Buffalo Public Schools, all Buffalo Public Schools students receive free school lunch. So that means all Buffalo Public School parents would have gotten pandemic EBT. And then there's a whole, if you get SNAP, I think they got it earlier and it came on your SNAP or Medicaid card. If you don't have SNAP or Medicaid and you lost the card that we got from the first round, you can contact OTDA, the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, to request a new card. You can do it through an automated system, but I know I screwed that up. So I ended up talking to a person, but it really wasn't, it didn't take long. I wasn't on hold forever. So I think they're doing an okay job. And the information is based on information sent straight to the state from the school. So the local Department of Social Services, even if you get SNAP, the local Department of Social Services won't have any information about your pandemic EBT. You have to check with the state. So I put the website up there, but if you just Google OTDA pandemic EBT, it should come right up. And this year it was a lot of money. It's really helpful. Okay, I think that's it for that. Oh, I flew through that. So if we have any questions, I'm happy to address those.
I don't think we have any questions now, but anyone feel free to still type it in the chat or in the Facebook comments. If it comes up later on in the presentation, we can answer your question at the end. Zara, we can pass it on to you then.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Diana, for that very informative presentation. It was very helpful. Sorry, struggling with this. Second. So as Emily mentioned, my name is Zara, and I am the tax attorney working, or the qualified tax expert / staff attorney working in the low-income taxpayer clinic with the Volunteer Lawyers Project. My presentation today is going to be focused on tax credits and how they can help you with your education, and then also some of the tax credits that might be beneficial in general to all taxpayers. So for today's discussion, we're going to talk first about the types of credits, so refundable credits versus non-refundable credits, because that distinction can be very important as to what it means for how much money you'll get back. Then we're going to get right into the education credits. So the two primary education credits are the American Opportunity Tax Credit and the Lifetime Learning Credit. We're then going to talk about the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. Just a disclaimer, I'm first going to go over what these, how these credits operated pre-American Rescue Plan and how the American Rescue Plan has expanded those, especially with the filing season sneaking up upon us pretty closely. Okay. Well, there are two types of tax credits. As we mentioned, non-refundable credits, which ultimately means that a taxpayer will get a refund only to the extent that they owe money. So an example would be the mortgage interest credit. Sorry, this is a little outdated, but I prefer to use the lifetime learning credit, especially because we're going to talk about it later. So if we use a lifetime learning credit, it is a non-refundable tax credit. So the maximum value that you can get for that credit is $2,000. If your tax liability is $1,000, for example, the lifetime learning credit will reduce your tax liability to zero. However, you will not get that additional $1,000 back as a refund. So that's really what non-refundable. Refundable, in which the taxpayer will be issued a refund for the amount that the value of the credit exceeds their tax liability. So using the earned income tax credit, I think would be great. The earned income tax credit is fully refundable. So just using same numbers for simplicity's sake, if a taxpayer was entitled to receive $2,000 for the earned income tax credit, they had a tax liability of $1,000. The earned income tax credit would first reduce their tax liability to zero, and then they would also get that additional $1,000 back as a refund. So as we mentioned earlier, there are two primary education credits, the American Opportunity Tax Credit and the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit. What an education credit does is it helps with the cost of higher education by reducing one's tax liability on their return. If it is a refundable tax credit, then you would also be issued a refund. Also, disclaimer, I'm going to probably refer to the American Opportunity Tax Credit as the AOTC and the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit as the LLC. Again, the LLC is not a business structure in this context. Okay. So the general eligibility requirements, the first is that there must be qualified education expenses which are paid. These can be paid by the taxpayer, their dependent, or any third party. So it's important to note that we're not concerned so much with who has paid the qualified education expenses. We're more concerned with the fact that they are qualified education expenses, and we will discuss what that means in just a few minutes. The second requirement is that the student must be an eligible student, must be enrolled in an eligible education institution. And the eligible student must be yourself, so the taxpayer filing the tax return, your spouse, or a dependent that you've claimed on your tax return. So the American Opportunity Tax Credit is a credit for qualified education expenses that is paid for an eligible student for the first 4 years of higher education. The distinction between this tax credit and the other education credit is the first 4 years requirement. So that's important to note. The maximum credit is $2,500 per student. Up to 40% of that, 40% of the AOTC is refundable. So if you are eligible to receive the full $2,500, you can get up to $1,000 as a refund. It is important to know that this tax credit does phase out, as most of them do. So taxpayers with income below $80,000 or $160,000, if they are filing as married, filing jointly, are eligible to receive the full amount. Taxpayers with income above $90,000 or $180,000, if they are filing as married, filing jointly, cannot claim the AOTC. Ultimately, they are phased out completely. So in terms of qualified expenses, as you remember, that was the first prong. Qualified expenses include amounts paid for tuition, fees, and other expenses which are required for enrollment. For the AOTC specifically, amount paid for books are considered eligible expenses. That is not the case for the lifetime learning credits. It's also important to note that for both credits, residence is not considered a qualified expense, nor is food. So that's just something to be aware of. sorry, I apologize, this didn't translate well onto PowerPoint, but what is an eligible student? So for purposes of the American Opportunity Tax Credits, an eligible student is somebody who is pursuing a degree or other recognized education credential. They must be enrolled at least half-time for at least one academic period. They must not have finished the first 4 years of higher education at the beginning of the tax year. And hand in hand with that, they must not have claimed the American Opportunity Tax Credit for more than 4 tax years. They also must not have a felony drug conviction at the end of the tax year. Move on to the lifetime learning credit. So the lifetime learning credit is also a credit for tuition and related expenses paid for eligible students who are enrolled in an eligible educational institution. The credit amount is $2,000 per tax return, and it is non-refundable. So if you compare that to the, I believe it was $2,500 for the American Opportunity Tax Credit. This is, sorry, it was $2,500 per eligible student. This is $2,000 per tax return, and it is completely non-refundable. So that is important to note. Some other key differences between the lifetime learning credit and the American Opportunity Tax Credit is that the lifetime learning credit can be used to help pay for undergraduate degrees, graduate education, or a professional degree. This also includes courses to acquire or improve job skills. The student does not need to be pursuing a degree or other recognized education credential, so they can take as little as 1 course as opposed to the AOTC, where you have to be enrolled at least for half-time. You must be enrolled for half-time of the course load. And there is no limit on the number of years you can claim the credit. So if you are eligible for the American Opportunity Tax Credit, if you are within the first 4 years of your post-secondary education, that will probably be the better option. You cannot claim both, so you can claim either or for the student. And so if you're not eligible for the American Opportunity Tax Credit, the lifetime learning credit is also very beneficial. So moving on to some of the general but very beneficial tax credits. One of the most significant in the tax code is the Earned Income Tax Credit. And this is the largest need-tested anti-poverty cash entitlement program. This information on the slide right now is pre-American Rescue Plan. So it has changed slightly, and we're going to go, or actually significantly actually, but we will discuss the changes on the next slide. So I just want to provide a baseline, and then we will discuss how that's changed for year 2021. So to be eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit, you must file an income tax return, and you have to meet other requirements, which includes that you have to have a social security number valid for employment. You cannot be the qualifying child of another filer. You must have earned income. And sorry, it's missing from this slide, but there's also an age requirement. So you have to be between the ages of 25 to 65 years old, which is important to note because that has changed for year 2021. I have referenced on the slide publication 5334, which is a great resource to determine whether or not you are eligible. Ultimately, it's a flow chart that asks a series of questions, and based on your answers, you can see whether or not you are eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit. I have to give you a disclaimer that that has not been updated to reflect the changes for the American Rescue Plan. So if you do prefer to use publication 5334, just keep in mind the changes that we're going to discuss on the next slide. Before I discuss the changes, I will also state that there is an IRS tool to determine eligibility, which is a live tool. So that might be more appropriate than using the publication 5334. And you can find that at the link listed on the presentation. Okay, so the American Rescue Plan temporarily expanded the Earned Income Tax Credit. Most significantly, these are the most significant changes. So it increased the maximum amount of the credit for taxpayers who do not have a child. Pre-American Rescue Plan, it was $540. However, that has been increased to $1,500, which is a pretty steep increase. Sorry, I'm going to take a step back. So one of the requirements for the Earned Income Tax Credit is that you must have a maximum of $3,650 of investment income. If you have investment income above that, you are not eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit. The American Rescue Plan temporarily increased that investment income cap to $10,000. Again, that's a pretty steep increase, and it's important to note. And finally, the age eligibility has been significantly increased. So now it includes for tax year 2021, it includes individuals aged 19 to 24 and individuals aged 65 or older. So as you can see, we are, a large demographic is now eligible for this year, as opposed to pre-COVID and pre-American Rescue Plan. Okay, sorry, this did not translate well to PowerPoint, but I want to first talk about the child tax credit, again, pre-American Rescue Plan. So this is a credit for individuals who claim an eligible child as an independent. It is in addition to the child independent care expenses, as well as the earned income tax credit. The maximum amount that you can claim pre-American Rescue Plan was $2,000, and up to $1,400 of that amount was refundable. So $600 of it is completely non-refundable, but you can get $1,400 as a refund. The American Rescue Plan has temporarily expanded the child tax credit as well, I think for the better, but so for 2021 only, the American Rescue Plan has increased the eligibility age to children under the age of 18. That was before it was limited to children under the age of 17. So we have increased demographic there. Also, the amount of the credit has increased from $2,000 to $3,000. And if you have a child under the age of 6, they are eligible to receive $3,600. It is now also fully refundable. I say now, but for tax year 2021, and there's also no minimum income requirement. So that's very significant. It's not on the slide, but as many of you, the IRS has been making payments of the advanced child tax credit. So they've been making advance payments as of July 15th, 2021, in order to receive that. If you had filed your 2019 or 2020 tax return, you should automatically be receiving those. You do have the option to opt out. So if you prefer to receive the full amount, you can do that by claiming the expanded child tax credit on your 2021 tax return. You can opt out of the advance payments on the IRS website, and then you can just claim it again in 2022 when you file your tax return. I think that's, otherwise you should be receiving them. I know that there are some issues if you would like to receive them and you believe that you're eligible and you're not receiving them right now, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office. We can assist in that regard. So record keeping is extremely important, really, for all of these tax credits. As I mentioned, I think on the outset of the presentation, in order to claim any of these benefits, you do have to file a tax return. The IRS, once a tax return is filed, the IRS has 3 years to assess any additional tax, based on the information that they receive. The earned income tax credit especially is heavily audited. So I do highly recommend that you keep your records, especially for, at least for the first 3 years. And most of the information can be scanned. So if you can electronically store that, I would highly encourage you to do so. And generally, the IRS will to see proof of relationship and residency for any dependents claimed. You want to keep records of the proof of income and expenses. Also proof of eligible education expenses. So the 1098T is what you would receive, for the education expenses. You should receive all of that by January 30th of the following tax year. So once the tax year ends, so December 31st, 2021, you should receive, the 1098T or W2, sorry, by January 30th of 2022. There's one slide that I think did not make it to this presentation, but as I mentioned earlier, all of these credits and benefits are great. They have provided immense help to many families across the country. One thing to note, though, that unless you file a tax return, you really can't claim any of these benefits. And so, although a lot of people are under the impression that if you don't have a filing obligation, you don't have to file a tax return, which is true, but that also means that you'll be missing out on all of these benefits. And so there are a lot of free filing tax resources available on the IRS website. If if you meet certain low income thresholds. There are also free tax preparation sites. So really you could go online and use one of the free tax preparation websites if you're comfortable doing that by yourself. But also as tax season begins probably January 15th to April 15th, there will be free tax preparation sites where you can take, you can make an appointment, take your documents, and somebody can help you and file your tax return and hopefully claim all of the credits that you're eligible for. And to do that, you can, there is a free file tool on the IRS website, and there's also a VITA site locator. So we will have this posted to our website, so it should, we will share the information there. I apologize that it's missing here, but you can even just, Google IRS VITA site locator. You'll enter in your zip code, and it will show you all of the VITA sites that are close to you. Right now, it might show zero sites just because we're not in tax season. So many of the sites are not currently operating. But if you do, for whatever reason, need assistance filing tax returns, please do reach out to our office. We do have a couple of connections that are still, I believe there's one or two VITA sites that are operating, but it's just not posted on the IRS website. And with that, does anybody have any questions?
Much, Zara. We actually have two questions. The first one I will say is for Ms. Prosky. One of the questions we received is, are DSS offices open now that we are kind of COVID post-pandemic, or are they still doing everything over the phone and online?
They're still doing a lot over the phone and online. The state gave them the only thing that absolutely had to be in person, or one of the only things that was required by the law to be in person, is the certification interview for cash assistance. So the waiver for that expires at the end of this month. It's possible it will be extended. And I think they've actually found that for a lot of people, phone interviews work relatively well. So they may change the law to try to continue that. If you get your recert packet before the end of this month, if it's sent out this month for your certification or recertification, and you get that letter saying it's a phone interview, they will still do it as a phone interview. We did ask them that, and they clarified that they'll do that. And then most of the other benefits they've been able to do over the phone and by fax. For emergency assistance, if you're going to be applying after September 30th, I would check the Department of Social Services Emergencies website, because they actually have a lot of information on their website, including application forms, the forms for the specialized grants that you might have to fill out, the vendor lists. And then I would also just want to remind everyone, HEAP is opening early this year. I forgot to mention that. HEAP is opening October 1st for regular HEAP, and then it will be opening for emergency HEAP January 3rd. So we're getting at least an extra month on the front end, because normally it doesn't open until the first or second week of November.
Perfect, thank you so much. And then the second question is for Zara. The question is, can a parent who is studying but also has a student or a child that is a student in an undergraduate program, can the parent claim 2 credits? I'm assuming the education credits, or should the file independently and claim the credit themselves?
So if you have an eligible student,
and the parents themselves are also a student.
If that's the case, as long as they meet the dependency requirement, so as long as the child meets the dependency requirement, then you could, in theory, claim both tax credits. I'm not sure if that's helpful.
No, that's perfect. Again, if anyone has any other further questions in regards to public benefits or questions regarding tax filing, you can give either of our offices a call. I'll repeat the number for Neighborhood Legal Services, 716-847-0650. And then Zara, if you want to go to the last slide. One more. These are our numbers for VLP. So if you have a tax question following this presentation, you can give our office a call, 716-847-0662, extension 324. But these are also the other helpline numbers if you are experiencing any issues or have any questions regarding any of these other topics. Thank you again so much, Zara, and go ahead.
Sorry, I actually wanted to double check. So I believe actually you are limited to only one of the tax credits, but I think I mentioned in the presentation. But if you'd like to reach out to our office, we can look at your specific set of circumstances and assess what the best way to go about that. So it might be better for the student to file an independent tax return, but please do reach out to our office and we can look into that further for you. Sorry, thank you.
No, absolutely. This presentation, like Ms. Pratsky said in the beginning, is providing general information, but everything can be case specific. So please feel free to reach out to either of our offices for follow-up questions. Again, thank you so much, Diana and Zara, for today's presentation. I hope
Thank you.
it's helpful for everyone. I hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you.